What's going on, guys? Dan from SSG bringing you another Edison format deck profile. This time I'm profiling my take on the Chaos Beatdown deck, or Chaos Hero, or whatever you want to call it. This deck just got top 8 at the RBET tournament, the most recent one, and we're going to get right into the deck list. We have one copy of Element Hero Stratos and 3 copies of Neos Alias. I think this engine is very concise. It just does a lot of different things. It's very powerful, just summoning a monster every single turn, and having the built-in card advantage of Element Hero Stratos is just very powerful. But we want to have access to light monsters all the time just to keep summoning and beating down our opponent, and Alias does a great job at that. I think this package also gives you access to Gemini Spark, which is a very powerful removal spell. So overall, just very solid engine here. We have 2 copies of Cyber Dragon. Cyber Dragon's a very powerful card in this format, as many of you may know, and we're just going to be able to break boards going second with this card, but also just push in damage. Drop this into play, then summon our Neos Alias and start pushing for damage, try to clock our opponent, with being able to kill our opponent and have multiple big monsters in play while interacting with our various trap and spell cards as well. So we're just going to be able to beat down, and Cyber Dragon's extremely powerful. It just does a lot for this deck, so we're running 2 in the main board. We're running all 3 copies of Gravekeeper Spy with no Descendant. I like the 3 Spy just to have access to it. I think it's very powerful at walling a lot of decks that can't really beat you with normal summoning. So I think they'll have to special summon to kind of beat this card, and it's very powerful. It's not really a card you have to commit much to, but it's very good. And also, it's just kind of a +1. It can kind of just do its own thing, just sit there, and eventually you do start beating down for 2400 if this card lives. So you just get another one out and start attacking and kind of play the card advantage game. But it's also very good for setting up our next card, which we run 2 copies of Caius. So Caius is kind of a card that you want to be playing in any of these sort of slow chaos-based decks, but we can't really enable 3 because we're not playing a card like Treeborn Frog. So I think 2 copies is very good in combination with Cyber Dragon, in combination with the Gravekeeper Spy. So there's a few ways to enable this card, so we're going to run 2 copies, and it's going to be kind of a power card for us in this deck here. We're electing to run 2 copies of the kycoo. Kycoo is very powerful, just like it is in GOAT format. They're in the Chaos Warrior decks. This card's going to do a very similar role here, just prevent Vayu from banishing from the graveyard, threaten the opponent's graveyards, and just be really strong there. And 1800 is nothing to cough at. I think it's a excellent beat stick, and it's exactly what you want to do in this format, especially in combination with a lot of the removal we're playing in our deck. This card's really going to actually get in there and declare an attack directly. So 2 copies of kycoo. We have 2 copies of Warrior Lady. Card's really strong. I think it's really underrated. I think that the Fairy deck kind of strives by having multiple copies of this in their deck. So we're going to run 2 copies here. It's just a solid card, solid beater, and also just kind of replaces itself by banishing the opponent's monster, right? Just easily trading 1 for 1. And a lot of times you're trading up in those situations, as you can play this card into a monster that you are having trouble dealing with. So more removal is also good, especially when built into our monster count. Of course, we have the 1 copy of Chaos Sorcerer. I think card's just really powerful. I wish we could have more copies in Edison format, but hey, we're a Chaos deck. We're going to run the 1 copy, and it's going to be great for us. Last monster deck, sort of a tech slot. We have 1 copy of Spirit Reaper. Card's just really good. I think I like Spirit Reaper a lot in this format, but we have so much removal in this deck that I want access to the Spirit Reaper. Similar to the kycoo, it's going to get in for a direct to hit, and that's when Spirit Reaper is at its most powerful. But overall, it helps to enable the caius. It helps with your 1 for removal to get in direct attacks and can slow the game down to a halt, which is what we're really trying to do in this slower kind of control chaos deck. So 1 copy of Spirit Reaper, and we move on to the spell cards. We have 2 copies of E-Call. We want access to all of our monsters. We want access to the turn 1 Stratos. Really powerful. Emergency Call is going to help us get there. And then we have 2 copies of Gemini Spark. Spark is just an excellent card. Just keeps our deck going by exchanging our Gemini monsters and killing their cards and drawing. And the drawing is a really important part of this deck, because we're not going to have too much draw power in this deck. So we're going to have to be able to see more cards, and Gemini Spark is a way to be interacting with them as well as pushing our game forward. So really good card here, and I like having access to the 2 Sparks. I like to play 2 copies of Smashing Ground. I think this card is just excellent in combination with Kycoo and Spirit Reaper. It can just do so much big damage, but I think this deck can struggle with bigger monsters, things like Absolute Zero, and you want to be able to answer those cards at a 1-for-1 rate and not kind of lose your whole board to it. So 2 copies of Smashing Ground just kind of get in there. I also like Smashing Ground in combination with Cyber Dragon, just being able to drop Cyber Dragon into play, maybe drop your normal summon, and then commit the Smashing Ground. A lot of times they're not going to torrential you in that kind of position. You can kind of create a board for yourself and blank their torrential in that spot and be able to start attacking through with your Kygoos and Reapers after, you know, they may not expect a card like Smashing Ground to flip the tempo in your favor. So it combos well with Cyber Dragon, and it's very good at removing hard threats that are hard to deal with. So 2 copies of Smashing there. We have 1 copy of Allure Darkness. We have a bunch of darks in this deck. We're going to play Allure. It's a good card. 1 copy of Brain Control. This one doesn't seem as obvious to me. I think I just took it from the list that topped. I thought, hey, if it worked for the player that got top 8, then I'm going to try it myself. I think it's pretty solid because there are outs to get rid of your monster, things like sacrificing for Caius, sacrificing for the Cyber Dragon. You don't play any tuners in the deck, so you can't always do that. You can't always get rid of the monster, but I think when it's going for a game push or tribute summoning, there aren't enough outs in the deck that you can elect to play Brain Control. So we just decided to take that part of the list from the one that topped and kind of just trust the judgment there. We have 1 copy of Reinforcement of the Army, of course, so we're just going to search our stratos most of the time, but we can also grab Warrior Lady. Card's just solid. We have 1 copy of MST. We want to be trading cards with our opponent. MST does a great job of that. On to the trap cards. We have 2 copies of Bottomless Trap Hole, just standard removal here. Card's just very, very good. We're going to be banishing our opponent's creatures. Speaking of banishing our opponent's creatures, 2 copies of Dimensional Prison. Card's just really strong here. I wanted to go up to 3, but I elected to play another tech card that's coming up over the 3rd one, because I think it combos well with the Kycoo, with the Spirit Reaper, and it kind of just does like some cool different things but in this deck. But 2-dimensional prison is just always going to be great for us. I elected to go up to 2 copies of Royal Oppression instead of the list that tops playing 1. I just want to be a dedicated control deck, right? I think that if you're playing this style of deck, I think one of the upsides of playing a deck like this is the fact that you get to play a card like Royal Oppression. So I went up to 2 in the main board. I understand why the player only elected to play 1, but I think 2 is really just solid, and you're going to be playing a lot of games with just alias. You're not always going to have your chaos sorcerers and things like that. So the 2 Royal Oppressions. 1 copy of Solemn Judgment to protect all of our back rows. We have the Mirror Force and Torrential, of course, solid removal. And then my tech card, I've been trying 1 copy of Compulsory Evacuation Device in this deck because I think it's really good at answering the bigger threats that are hard to deal with, you know. I think cards like Stardust can be hard to deal with if you have cards like Smashing Ground kind of bricked in your hand, and this card can kind of just get rid of that easily. It also just combos with Reaper and Kycoo, just getting a monster out of play and getting that value. And I think a lot of the times when you bounce monsters that aren't going to the extra deck and you're not actually getting value, this is kind of a -1, but the attack with Kycoo or Reaper actually can replace the card that you're going down a lot in that kind of a position. So I do like the card overall answering extra deck monsters and also just getting those attacks in with your high impact direct attack creatures. We're running 1 copy of Dustshoot. 1 copy of Dust Tornado. Very good card at removing our opponent's back row. We have 1 copy of Starlight Road. I think it conflicts a little bit with Royal Oppression, but I still like to run it. I like to play this card to protect against Heavy Storm, but also just like give our deck an additional win condition in these kind of control decks. I've talked about it before, where we just want to have access to those high power spikes in our deck because it's very solid. And then wouldn't be an SSG profile without it. The copy of Trap Dustshoot, very powerful. Let's open this card on turn 1 and let's win some games. Quick extra deck. We only have 2 cards here. It's the Stardust and the chimeratech. So we're gonna, play probably 3 of each of them for our Road and chimeratech. You can play Gale in this deck. I was thinking about it for a while, but I landed on not playing it. And in that case, you would make a full extra deck. But we have just these 2 for showing you what you actually need right now. Into the side, 3DD Curl. I still like this card a lot. Card's just really powerful. We want it on turn 1. We can't be getting caius every turn, so we need to get rid of that tree board on turn 1 and cut off access to that card. we then go for 3 copies of Doomcaliber. I've been kind of waiting for a deck that I can play this card in. I think the card's like excellent in the matchups where it's actually good. Of course, it's not going to be good against a card like Tree-Run Frog, right? But I think in the slower matchups where like you're 1-for-1ing with your opponent and you kind of can just like get them with this card. The card's really good. It beats them down, makes them commit a card to even get rid of it, and like it's just a solid beat stick that can sit next to Alias and beat down. So I like the copy of Doomcaliber, 3 copies of Doomcaliber Knight. I think it's just a sweet card. It's one of my favorite cards ever printed, and I've been waiting for a place to play it, and why not this deck? So all 3 in the sideboard. I'm electing to play the 3rd copy of Kycoo. Card's going to be excellent in the decks that where you want it. So we're going to play the 1 copy against decks like Vayu Turbo. 2 copies of Lightning Vortex. As I mentioned before, this deck can have a little bit of trouble coming back, and I think taking the -1 to kill a big board is definitely powerful and worth it in a deck like this. We have 2 copies of Trap Hole. Just want to keep the board clear. I think it also helps you push in the kycoo attacks, which is very powerful. 2 Trap Hole just mostly against Blackwings, but I think even against like Gladiator Beasts, make sure their War Chariots are turned off. Make sure you can just kind of beat down and they don't have monsters in play. So 2 copies of the Trap Hole. 2 copies of Pulling the Rug. Caius is great against us. Caius is great against mostly everyone, but we're going to play 2 of these. It's going to be pretty solid for the most part. 1 copy of Dust Tornado in the sideboard, as well as the 2nd copy of Starlight Road on the sideboard as well. So that is the deck, guys. Let me know what you guys thought about the deck in the comment section below. I think the deck is pretty sweet. I thought when I saw it initially, I said, hey, this deck is pretty awesome. It's a chaos deck. You don't see that too often in Edison format, right? Because it's kind of like a, do I want to build around a 1 copy of Chaos Sorcerer? Most likely not, right? But I think in this case, it's really powerful because all your cards are great and they're all kind of like 1-for-1s. They're beating your opponent down, and you have a lot of good interaction in this format. The trap cards are very powerful in this format. So that is about it, guys. Drop a comment. Let me know what you guys thought about the deck. And without further ado, this is Dan V from SSG signing out.